والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Beloved brothers and sisters, honorable ulama, huffaz, hujjaj, mothers and fathers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. كيف حالكم؟ Alhamdulillah. Beloved brothers and sisters, alhamdulillah, we resume our after Maghrib programs. Alhamdulillah, and we start this evening with a resumption of our fiqh lessons, alhamdulillah. And just as we paused last year, we were in Kitab al-Tahara, and we had entered Bab al-Tayammum, the chapter or the section of Tayammum, the dry ablution. And in the last lesson that we looked at, prior to taking the break, we looked at the asbab, the scenarios, the reasons that warrant the performance of tayammum. This evening, inshallah, we are looking at the conditions, the shurut, for a tayammum, a dry ablution, to be intact, inshallah. So, the Shaykh writes, Shurutu tayammum ashara, that there are 10 conditions for tayammum to be in place. And I'll go through them, inshallah. أولاً أن يكون بتراب. The first condition is that you must perform your tayammum with the dust of the earth. Now, this is a very important point because sometimes, and there's actually in fact difference of opinion among scholars, but the more relied upon view is that you must be quite clear and cautious regarding the actual dust that you use or the actual soil that you use. So sometimes people say, well, can I, for example, we are in a masjid at the moment, so if there is no water here and we fulfill all the other requirements, can I, dab my hands on the carpet? Would that suffice? Now we need to look at the context, but the origin of turab, of dust, is the natural dust or soil that is from earth, what is natural. And this can be of clay origins, of sand origin, of rock origin, pebble origin. All of that falls into the category of turab. We won't make soil from pebble, for example. We won't chop up a rock to create soil. It must be naturally there. And then we can use dust that had accumulated in a place. So if we are in maybe a house and dust had accumulated, if you leave a room closed for a while, whatever, or you don't access a space, then you go back to it maybe a few weeks or months later, you can find a layer of dust. And so what the fuqaha write is that in order to have this condition met, when you dab, you must see the dust. You need to have evidence, because in fiqh we remove the excess thereof. But first condition, it must be performed with the dust of the earth. Secondly, وَأَنْ يَكُونَ التُّرَابُ طَاهِرًا, that the dust must be pure. Must be, of course, when we talk about the sand, the clay, etc., that must be pure. Thirdly, وَأَنْ لَا يَكُونَ مُسْتَعْمَلًا, that it must not have been used previously. So this is important as well. If you are using dust, that you don't reuse that. That essentially, it is the first time that you are using it. Also, it had not been dusted off a limb. So sometimes, in certain scenarios, there's no water, and we take some soil to the person who maybe can't move or leave their house. That is preferable, that you have some soil from outside. So what would occur is, if you use it, and of course you dust off your arm, and the dust falls on the sheet or whatever the ground, you don't sweep that back into a container to reuse. This is what the condition talks about. And then the fourth, that the dust or the soil must not be mixed with flour or anything like flour, anything else, which is not considered soil or dust, even if that substance is considered tahir or a pure substance. But it must be the soil, the dust. And then the fifth is وَأَنْ يَقْصِدَهُ, that you must intend to use it. So the fuqaha write with regards to this condition. Let's say it is a windy day and the wind is blowing and there's sand in the wind. Now you can't make an intention and just stand there and let it blow you. This is what the fuqaha have written about, that you must intend that you want to use that soil. Okay? And then we move on to the next few conditions. The sixth condition is that you are going to wipe your face and your hands with 2 strikes of that dust. There's going to be 2 strikes, right? 1, 2, 2 strikes. Also, the seventh condition is that you remove any impurity prior to starting. So if there's any impurity on you, you'd remove that. Similarly, when you are going to be using dust, you have to, or soil, you'd have to check that no dog or, had defecated or urinated in that area. So you'd have to evaluate it and say, okay, this area is not, frequently used. So if it is, for example, soil from your home and you do have a dog, that's going to be a bit challenging. You're going to have to check quite thoroughly. You'd have to look at where can I get soil from that a dog has not, been in. And then the eighth condition is that you determine the direction of the qibla before commencing the tayammum. Now, the fuqaha have written about this. The sheikh writes that you must have qibla before starting your tayammum. But there's been a revision of this opinion that in reality, the waqt of salah should have entered. Okay? And you are performing the tayammum to perform the fard salah. So if the waqt enters and you still have time, for example, let's say it is Asha. Asha, the waqt is quite long. So the waqt might enter, but you may still want to search for water in that amount of time because you perform it for a fard salah. So when the sheikh writes about finding qibla, it is with reference to actually that the waqt has entered. Okay? And then in addition to that, it must be that the time of the salah had entered. So with the qibla, this relates to the obligation of the salah, that it is now a fard salah upon you, and then the waqt has actually entered. It has entered and the fard salah is now upon you. And then the last condition is that you must have a new tayammum for every fard salah. You can't keep a single tayammum for another fard salah. But you can use one tayammum for multiple sunnah salahs in a single waqt. So if it is a dhuhr salah and the waqt has entered, you can perform one tayammum for the sunnahs before dhuhr, your fard salah, and the sunnahs after dhuhr. And when Asr comes in, you would need a new tayammum because it is a new waqt of salah. And so we conclude, inshallah, just some points from the conditions: that the dust must be pure and not mixed with anything else. And you mustn't create the dust. So I've sometimes heard people say, if you shake out a blanket sufficiently, you can generate enough dust. So that's not the objective. The objective would always be to use the pure soil that is from outside. So to go outside and get that pure soil, 2 strikes are needed, and tayammum will be required for every fard salah, inshallah. Any questions? Jazakallahu khairan wa sallallahu wa sallam ala rabbil alamin. Shukran.